Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. We're going to be tackling financial literacy and macroeconomics today, but we're taking a bit of a different approach with this one.
Oh,
Yeah, our main source material for this deep dive is an interview with Robert Kiyosaki.
the Rich Dad Poor Dad author.
Exactly, and he's got some pretty um, unconventional views, to say the least.
He's definitely known for shaking things up in the financial world.
Right, and he kind of jumps right into it in this interview by talking about the lack of real financial education in schools.
I think that's a point a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, and he even goes so far as to say that even people with PhDs can be totally clueless about money.
He's not saying that formal education isn't important, but I think he's highlighting the fact that it often overlooks practical financial skills that are essential in everyday life.
And he's right. We're kind of just thrown out there into this world where we're expected to make these big financial decisions, but most of us were never really taught how to make those decisions.
Exactly. And then he gets into the importance of understanding the difference between assets and liabilities.
Yeah, he's got a pretty specific definition of an asset, too.
Right. He defines it as something that puts money in your pocket, whether you're working or not.
So simple, but so powerful when you really think about it.
Absolutely. And it really changes the way you view traditional financial advice.
Well, that's where things get really interesting because he argues that conventional retirement plans like 401ks are actually liabilities.
Yeah, his reasoning is that they take money out of your pocket up front and limit your control and flexibility compared to owning something that generates income.
It's a different way of looking at it for sure. And then he goes on to challenge this idea that your house is an asset.
Most people would probably say their house is their biggest asset.
Right. But Kiyosaki argues that it doesn't actually generate cash flow and instead requires constant expenses.
This is where understanding the difference between cash flow and appreciation becomes really crucial.
I mean, a house might increase in value over time.
Sure, but you also have to factor in those ongoing costs like your mortgage, property taxes, and maintenance.
Yeah, so he's really encouraging people to look at their homes through this lens of cash flow.
Does it add to your cash flow or is it draining it?
And then he takes things even further by advocating for the strategic use of debt.
Debt, like as a good thing.
Well, he believes it can be when used strategically to acquire assets that will generate income.
I can already imagine some people raising their eyebrows at that one.
Oh, definitely. It's not exactly conventional wisdom, right? But he even shares a story about how he bought his first property using 100% credit card financing.
Wow, that's pretty bold.
Yeah, it definitely highlights his risk tolerance, but he's also emphasizing that this approach requires a really deep understanding of financial risk management.
That's key. Responsible debt management is absolutely essential.
He's not saying to go out and max out all your credit cards. He's talking about calculated decision-making based on your individual financial situation and goals.
It makes sense. And he also stresses the importance of emotional intelligence when it comes to making those decisions.
Yeah, he feels like that's something that traditional education often overlooks.
Right. He argues that navigating the financial world requires more than just knowledge.
You've got to have that mental toughness.
Being able to handle setbacks.
And having the resilience to keep going even when things get challenging.
That's almost like an athlete training for a big competition.
Yeah, like Tiger Woods, you need that mental fortitude to perform under pressure.
And in the same way, making sound financial decisions requires that resilience and the ability to learn from your mistakes.
It's about understanding how your emotions might be influencing your choices, especially when it comes to money.
He believes traditional education often discourages risk-taking and punishes mistakes.
Which can really hinder the development of those crucial skills he's talking about.
It's interesting because it seems like a lot of what he's saying comes from his personal experience.
Well, for sure. And he's a big advocate for finding mentors.
Like the three wise men searching for the best teacher.
Exactly. He stresses the value of learning from people who have already achieved financial success.
People who can offer guidance and share their experiences.
And help you navigate the complexities of the financial world.
But at the same time, he also cautions against those get-rich-quick schemes.
He's like, be careful who you trust. Not all financial advice is created equal.
It's important to really evaluate the advice you're getting and make sure it aligns with your own financial goals.
Exactly. And now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about macroeconomics.
All right, bring on the big picture stuff.
Well, Kiyosaki brings up this topic that's been making a lot of headlines lately, the impact of money printing on inflation.
It's definitely a hot topic, and he ties it to wealth disparity as well,
Yeah, essentially he's saying that when more money is printed, it can lead to inflation.
which can disproportionately impact those with lower incomes.
Exactly, because they often struggle to keep up with rising costs for everyday necessities.
And Kiyosaki links this phenomenon to a growing gap between the wealthy and everyone else.
He even goes so far as to suggest that it's a deliberate strategy to create this class divide.
Now, whether or not you agree with his perspective, it definitely raises some important questions about the role of government policies.
And how those policies impact our lives.
Absolutely. It's crucial to understand how these macroeconomic forces can affect your personal finances.
Like inflation can really erode the purchasing power of your savings.
So it's important to think about strategies to protect and grow your wealth in this type of environment.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground with Kiyosaki so far.
From the basics of assets and liabilities to the bigger picture of macroeconomic policies.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to unpack and explore.
So stick with us as we continue this deep dive into Kiyosaki's world and uncover some more of his unconventional wisdom.
And one thing that really stands out about Kiyosaki is that he's not afraid to express some strong opinions,
Oh, yeah, he definitely doesn't hold back.
especially when it comes to certain government policies.
He's pretty critical of some of them.
Yeah, he argues that they actually make the wealth gap worse instead of better.
He specifically calls out student loan forgiveness programs.
Oh yeah, that's a hot button issue for sure.
He claims they place an unfair burden on the middle class while mainly benefiting people who are already well off financially.
It's definitely a controversial viewpoint.
It sparked a lot of debate.
It's important to note that his views don't necessarily reflect the consensus among economists.
Yeah, he's kind of out there on his own with some of this stuff.
But his perspective does highlight the complexities of government intervention in the economy.
And the potential for unintended consequences.
Right, because sometimes those policies might not have the intended effect.
And he also draws this really stark contrast between the economic policies of different political administrations.
He seems to have a pretty clear preference for certain approaches.
Yeah, he favors policies that he believes promote economic growth and individual prosperity.
Things like encouraging entrepreneurship, reducing regulation, and incentivizing investment.
He thinks those approaches ultimately benefit a wider range of people.
Makes sense. But of course, there are different perspectives on this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And his political commentary can be pretty polarizing.
I think what's valuable, though, is his emphasis on personal responsibility.
And the importance of mentorship when it comes to achieving financial success.
He really highlights the power of learning from people who have already been there and done that,
He talks about his own experience learning from his rich dad.
and how that shaped his views on money and wealth creation.
Yeah, and he stresses the importance of finding mentors who have a proven track record of success.
And who are willing to share their knowledge and experience openly.
But he also acknowledges that finding the right mentors can be a challenge.
Especially these days, with so much information and misinformation out there.
Right, you have to be careful who you trust.
He cautions against blindly following online gurus or those get-rich-quick schemes.
It's about doing your research and finding mentors whose values align with your own financial goals.
Exactly. And he really stresses that financial literacy is a journey.
It's not just a destination you arrive at.
It requires continuous learning, a willingness to adapt, and a commitment to personal growth.
It's not just about absorbing information, but actually putting it into practice.
And that's where his emphasis on emotional intelligence comes in.
He argues that traditional education often fails to develop those crucial skills.
Skills like mental toughness, resilience, and the ability to stay calm under pressure.
He draws a lot from his experiences in the Marines.
That makes sense. He learned a lot about handling pressure in that environment.
And he believes those qualities are just as important in the financial world.
When you're facing market volatility or unexpected financial challenges,
Emotional intelligence can help you make rational decisions instead of panicking.
it's about knowing your risk tolerance, understanding your own biases, and being aware of how your emotions might be affecting your choices.
He also talks about the importance of having a strong support network.
Having people you can turn to for encouragement and guidance when things get tough,
It's about having those people in your corner who can help you stay grounded.
and remind you of your long-term goals.
It's kind of like having a financial coach in your corner.
Someone to help you stay focused and motivated on your financial journey.
It's about creating that support system that can help you achieve your financial aspirations. I think it's really interesting how Kiyosaki emphasizes that understanding the language of money is like the first step to taking control of your finances.
Yeah, like you have to know the rules of the game before you can really play it.
And he argues that financial illiteracy is more widespread than we might think.
He says even highly educated people can struggle with this stuff.
And that this lack of understanding can lead to some pretty bad decisions.
Missed opportunities, too.
Yeah, like you might be missing out on chances to grow your wealth because you don't fully grasp certain concepts.
He believes a lot of people are intimidated by all the financial jargon,
So they kind of avoid dealing with their finances altogether.
but he's trying to break down those complex ideas into more understandable terms.
So that people feel empowered to take charge of their money.
It's like he's trying to demystify the whole world of finance.
And he actually created a board game called Cash Flow to make learning about these things fun.
That's cool. I've heard of that game.
It's a really engaging way to learn about financial concepts.
It's like learning by doing, which is always more effective.
And Kiyosaki also encourages people to think differently about wealth creation.
He's not a big fan of the traditional path, working for a steady paycheck and relying solely on a 401k,
He's all about exploring alternative avenues,
like entrepreneurship or real estate investing.
even using debt strategically to buy assets that will generate income.
He's definitely got some unconventional ideas.
But he's also realistic. He knows there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
It's about finding what works for you, your circumstances, and your risk tolerance.
But he also cautions against blindly following the crowd.
Don't just accept the status quo, right?
Think critically about your choices. Challenge those assumptions.
And be open to new strategies.
Because at the end of the day, Kiyosaki's message is all about taking action.
It's not enough to just read books or listen to podcasts.
You have to actually apply what you learn.
Put it into practice.
He talks about starting small, taking calculated risks, and embracing the learning process.
Even when things don't go as planned.
Because setbacks are inevitable, they're part of the journey.
Building wealth is a marathon, not a sprint.
And persistence is key.
It's about having that long-term vision.
And being in it for the long haul.
I think that's a great message to end on.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Kiyosaki's world, we want to leave you with a final thought.
What resonated with you most from his ideas?
Which financial concept from his philosophy would you like to explore further?
And most importantly, what action can you take today to apply it to your own life?
Because remember, financial empowerment is within your reach.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep into the world of finance.